Hello and welcome back, Soul Tribe. This is David Berry 75's channel, and I'm your guest reader, Toni. And if you'd like to guest read, definitely give David send him an email or get a hold of him in Discord. All right, let's go on to chapter 11, the disciples. All right, to bring about hermetic realization, it is not enough to find a master, but it is necessary to have a disciple, a candidate who is converted into a true student of the mysteries of life. It is not that easy to find, as people are used to the traditional concept of education or learning, which maintains that all the student needs to do is study with the perseverance to become a savant in a subject. It is also believed that greater or lesser advancement depends on the quantity of knowledge that the individual receives from his teacher or from the school to which he belongs. In this way, if an institution exhibits an inflated program of hermetic studies or esoteric studies, the individual would feel very inclined to believe he has found the right path. Again, it is necessary to underline the enormous difference which exists between a study program and an initiatic school. In a study program, the individual is there only to learn things, which may or may not be useful, which may be real or subjective. In any case, the individual will not obtain salvation, will not be freed from the collective soul of the species, but in any event will advance along his path of development, attaining the necessary merit to continue his progress and perhaps become free in a future incarnation. In an initiatic school, the disciple has an opportunity to reach true evolution, to free himself from the collective soul of sapiens and convert himself into an authentic mutant of stellar men. A person who has been able to enter an initiatic school will need a series of indicators to point or points of references to become oriented into the work accomplished there. Otherwise, he will become prematurely disillusioned when he cannot understand the sense or contents of the disciple and instructions. Perhaps the greatest obstacle a student may encounter is the fact that it is useless to study Hermetic theory, since his intellect is not sufficiently advanced to unveil the mysteries presented to him. However intelligent an individual may be, he will find that reason and logic are not sufficient to understand the profound truth necessary to reach a very high state of awareness in which his intellectual powers attain optimum efficiency. We have already mentioned that a human being lives in a permanent dreamlike state, interrupted only by slight sparks of awareness, and although he appears to be awake during the day, he is in reality somnambulist. It's back, you guys. Somnambulist with a very low state of alertness. Thus, sapiens' reason and logic are intellectually instruments of onerous fantasy. This is very difficult to become aware of because of the natural obstacles of self-observation presented by these subtleties of human consciousness. For this reason, intelligence alone is not enough to become aware of events which take place in the world of waking realities. Thus, the student cannot at first rely on the strength of his reasoning. The student must learn to think with another brain so that another reasoning superior to the ordinary can be born within him. This can only be attained through true and not symbolic initiation. True initiation induces profound and concrete changes in the student's psychological structure. Initiation, however, is a painful and difficult process and will be successful only when the neophyte's superhuman effort. For the moment, we will. This will be explained more in more detail in further chapters. For the moment, we will limit ourselves to describing the conditions which a disciple must possess, and the internal and external obstacles he must overcome. In general terms, the school does not choose their disciples from among the most intelligent candidates, but rather from those who are characteristics which makes them especially fit to face the specter of their own bestiality, as in truth they must. A good guide for selection would be more or less the following. 1. To possess spiritual gold, internal content. 2. To be free from prejudice or being capable of overcoming them. 3. To have consciousness of one's own insignificance. 4. To ardently yearn for initiation, the complete process, as the most important thing in life. 5. To practice loyalty, dedication, consistency, and faithfulness towards the school. 6. To possess a flexible and agile intelligence. 7. To harmonize oneself for the fundamental keynote of the school. 8. To willingly comply with the instructions received. 9. To be free from the mental disturbances of a certain nature. We can appreciate how purity, the intellectual factor, professional titles or social positions do not count for much, but what is basically sought is the individual's inner nature and his capacity to dedicate himself to hermetic tasks, which last not only for all this terrestrial life, but will furthermore determine his future existence. No true school wishes to waste his time with individuals who cheat, that is, who will delude themselves in their yearning for spiritual excellence and their firm determination to become converted into superior beings. The schools prefer to dedicate their effort to those who effectively maintain a constant line of action in their work towards initiation. It is necessary to clarify that it is only possible to become a disciple after a period of trial in the school. An individual, however, may remain forever as a simple student without ever becoming a disciple, because he does not have the required aptitude for it. This is an easy path and a difficult path, which are the paths of the student and of the disciple. Each has disadvantages and privileges, and therefore no one, without an exhaustive analysis of the matter, can state that he will never be satisfied until he becomes a disciple. To explain these differences, we will compare both options. First, the easy path of the student. Obligations, very few. These specifically refer to living a life following higher moral and spiritual principles, and to practicing kindness and brotherhood. Logically, the student must also comply with the rules of the institution. Tests to be passed, these are relatively simple and do not demand great effort to be passed successfully. attainments, dominating and channeling of one's character, overcoming complexes, inhibitions, and frustrations, learning to handle mental power in order to channel it toward the goal of overcoming oneself or helping others. Knowledge of the mysterious of life and the fundamental causes of all that exists. Preparation for complete fulfillment in a future incarnation. In summary, the student evolves to a great extent, but does not achieve hermetic death. He is not completely freed from the collective soul of sapiens. The difficult path of the disciple. The obligation, tremendous and difficult to accomplish. The disciple must be willing to renounce his self during a certain period and take an oath of absolute obedience to his instructor. He must be willing to renounce everything if this is required. Test to pass. Very few individuals can endure them. In the novel Zanani, one of the tests is described meeting with the specter of the threshold. Nevertheless, in real life, this experience is less spectacular than the description of in Edward Bulwer Lytton's novel, but more difficult due to its subtlety. The negative part of nature, which could be called Satan, reacts against the disciple, who is faced with all kinds of negative reactions, as the power of darkness attempts to prevent his arrival at Olympus. Attainments reached in the case of the triumph and the test. After hermetic death, the disciple is converted into a mutant or stellar man, an individual who has reached the peak of evolution as a terrestrial man and who must start his evolution on a higher level. He reaches the immortality of his essence through the practice of conscious reincarnation and crosses the veil of the Maya, reaching absolute truth. He is beyond good and evil, beyond opposites, beyond pleasure and pain, and beyond happiness and misfortune, beyond life and death. These are not symbolic achievements, but are absolutely real and true. However, at this point, the neophyte is impelled to ask a series of questions. The neophyte will wonder if there is an attempt to convert the initiate into a Superman, an invincible and indestructible being who cannot become ill or die, and who does not need to eat or carry out normal biological functions. Many ask themselves, for example, why Cagliostro died in prison. Deducing from this and from the countless hazards in his life that he was not a true initiate. For our most part, we accept Cagliostro and the Count of Saint Germain as two of the greatest hermetic masters who have ever existed, and deny at the same time the alleged death of Cagliostro in prison. Even if this had occurred, it would not in any way make this great man any less brilliant. Appearances are generally deceptive, and masters of the stature of the Cagliostro take great care when they reveal their true purposes in order to not to suffer negative reactions from the human beast. In this case, we can apply the popular saying that those who dine with the devil should use a long spoon. That is, those who intervene in the worldly manners in order to save sapiens from inconvenient situations or to ease or improve their life conditions end up being sacrificed by those they have tried to help. Continuing with the false concept of Superman, we wish to ask the reader to imagine how he would feel if he was Clark Kent, Superman of American comics, the man who arrived from the planet Krypton. At first, this may seem very desirable, but after reflecting a while, it is easy to understand what a terrible punishment it would be to be physically immortal and indestructible, illness-proof, danger-proof, immune to any attack, able to resist desire of the heart or sex, to be constantly and inflexibly virtuous and perfect. If such a being existed, he would truly be a creation of the devil, a mechanical robot, a being absolutely inhuman and unhappy and deserving of great pity. We must remember that we learn from our failures and not from our successes, and that we appreciate things only when we are in danger of losing them. The spice of life is the lack of knowledge about what the future holds for us. Constantly facing the danger of losing all we have or of failing to reach our desires. Having everything and never losing anything would be unbearable and inhuman. The great Hermetic masters are not free from dangers, illness, or death, and this is precisely what is most beautiful, sublime, and inhuman about their existence. The fact that being so powerful is their fight for others. They are so reluctant to use their spiritual strength for their own benefit. We know that Jesus refused to save himself when faced with the threat of crucifixion. But this does not mean that he was an imposter. On the contrary, it means that he accepted with resignation and meekness the terrible ordeal imposed on him by his universal Father. The great Kabbalist Eliphas Levi said that those men and great initiates found it preferable to govern kings than to be kings themselves. It is possible to understand this. It is not difficult to understand that a truly important man should prefer to pass through life unnoticed, occupying a second-rate or third-rate position, fleeing from the fame, riches, and honors which immortalize human genius. The candidate for initiation must choose the easy or difficult path, but it should be done impartially and consciously, considering that if he chose the path of a student in the future, he may become a disciple. If he endeavors to turn himself prematurely into a disciple, his failure may be so crushing and painful that he will become irreversibly traumatized, and in this case must await another opportunity in a future incarnation. Whatever the choice, the student is faced with internal barriers that he must be aware of in order to have a clear idea of what is happening to him at a given moment. These barriers, among others, are vanity, pride, egotism, and self-sufficiency. When the individual has a very high degree of self-importance, this becomes the main barrier against facing Hermetic truth without prejudice. He believes he knows everything and is above these tricks. Of course he uses this or some similar rationalization out of ignorance of the subject. As without doubt, he has never been to a Hermetic school of initiation, and without having lived through this experience, he can have no opinion. There are others whose contact with the school has not been felicitous, and whose pride has been seriously wounded as they are not able to overcome the ordeals they faced. Torn apart by his feelings, and in order to save their precious pride, they discredit the teachings and the school, alleging for some reason, which they always find, that the school is deficient, useless, or dangerous. Returning to the four main obstacles which face the candidate for initiation, it is necessary to state that vanity is not only the narcissism of the individual, but also refers to his hollow knowledge. That knowledge which has neither content nor any true essential, profound, or transcendental significance. Vanity and pride require that a person should constantly appear before others as having power, importance or intelligence, which without doubt he does not possess. Pride is an infantile endeavor to fight against one's own weaknesses. Assuming a strength one lacks, egotism leads the individual to believe that he is the center of the universe and that all revolves around him. On the other hand, self-sufficiency is only ignorance of what one does not know. In summary, these defects make man exaggerate his own importance and believe himself to be superior to common mortals, looking down on all those who don't have the same educational level, social standing, or economic status. Only the experience of day-to-day living will eventually convince him that he is not as privileged as he thought. The real harm that this situation creates regarding an individual possibility of hermetic evolution consists in his unconscious rejection of all he hears, except when it comes from people with an image, prestige, or fame superior to his own. In reality, there is no possibility that the candidate will authentically face Hermeticism with intelligence until he lives the esoteric experience, which Grudem Jeff describes as the experience of his own nothingness, which is basically becoming aware of his own impotence to escape from the general conditions which guides one's life. This means realizing that it is not possible to obtain what one desires because things turn out differently than we expect or simply do not occur. And moreover, undesirable events also happen. It would be more to the point to state that Grudem called our own nothingness is in truth the practical realization that one is absolutely programmed physically, instinctively, emotionally, and intellectually, that it is impossible to disrupt the program, as this cannot be destroyed or modified in its fundamental and profound structures. Thus, the more important and inflated image a man has of himself, the less likely it is that he will be able to understand Hermetic philosophy. The program rejects Hermeticism as it is not incorporated in cultural community values, and if it were, people would blindly accept it, but such acceptance would have no value, as people would not go beyond imitation and superstition. In other words, it is important to genuinely and intrinsically recognize one's own smallness and insignificance in order to take the first steps to initiation. Otherwise, it would not be the individual himself who would be a student or disciple, but the false being, the mask, or the person, that is to say, the personality. Hermetically, we maintain that personality and the program are very similar, and as long as the student is not able to raise himself above his own personality, he will not come into contact with his true being, let alone acknowledge or let alone attain knowledge of the truth. For the Hermeticist, personality has a diabolical sense, as it is the mechanism which keeps the essential I dormant and a prisoner. At the beginning of his initiation, the student must endeavor to transcend his cerebral programming, even for a few minutes, for it will permit him to see himself to a certain extent. In order to transcend his program, he must force himself to be as impersonable as possible, leaving all previous concepts or ideas aside, as if he was a living intelligence flying through the universe, but without a physical body. To be impersonal involves impartiality, peace, freedom from fear, and a lack of faith and anti-faith. There is nothing more dangerous than those neophytes who are possessed with a holy faith, or those who are dominated by blind anti-faith. Neither can ever approach Hermeticism in a truly intelligent way, it is necessary to insist that the neophyte must clearly understand that if he approaches a school, it is not to be taught, since this is not the function of the initiatic schools. Hermeticism is a science prohibited to Homo sapiens. He is admitted to the school only to give him an opportunity to demonstrate the value of his internal content, that is, the power of his latent, his spiritual forces. And this force does not exist or is too scant. The individual is closer to the animal. This would make the leap he is trying to take completely impossible to the immensity of the abyss between the opposite poles, animal and man. The degree of spiritual force required indicates the magnitude of the distance an individual is from the animal condition. The neophyte is placed under a very special vital conditions and is given the tools necessary to enable him to rise from the state of consciousness and have access to knowledge. The knowledge in the school, but is not made available in the same manner as a science, a disciple, or any technique is taught. It is the disciple who must grasp the basic knowledge, which is always veiled. Thus, it is necessary to have eyes to see and ears to hear. The grasping of knowledge will only be possible if the student with the supreme effort of consciousness is able to penetrate the veil of allegories, parables, comparisons, and similes. Only those who are guided by their spirit of essential I will learn the truth. Those who are motivated solely by curiosity, egotism, and purely passional interest cannot reach the light of truth. This is fortunate, as there could be no greater curse than a stellar man or stellar woman who is villainous, immoral, or irresponsible. It is certain this cannot come to pass. When sapiens show his internal value, he is worthy of being helped and prepared for his subsequent planned mutation. Gradually, Hermetic science will cease being a prohibited knowledge for him, as he will be found worthy of his high honor of knowing the universal science. Summarizing, Hermetic knowledge is only for a small elite, but anyone who is deeply moved by an authentic spiritual restlessness may form part of this elite. Furthermore, the populace does not desire this knowledge. On the contrary, they despise it, confirming Jesus' words, "Do not throw pearls before swine." There are many who were born swine, are happy in that state, and will die swine. It is practically certain that this Hermetic secret will shock many people who would wish this knowledge to be freely given, and who see it as its prohibition a sign of egotism or weakness. Those who think this should observe nature, where abundance and mediocrity are synonymous, as superior organisms are scarce and appear only rarely and after a rigorous process of selection, as they form the elite of the species. Although the neophyte does not arrive at the initiatic school to be taught, as we have already stated, he must attend lectures or instructional classes. How is one to understand this paradox? It is very simple. Instruction is not for teaching, but rather to destroy the disciple's cerebral program to a certain extent, so he will gather his own knowledge through a process of interior illumination. The lectures are not to be memorized or learned, but they are the spiritual and intellectual firmament for the profound transformation which must be produced within the student. Nevertheless, for these changes to be effective, it is necessary to know how to listen so that everything received during the instruction reaches one's reasoning faculty in an integral form, as sapiens usually understand only what he wishes to and rejects whatever conflicts with his self-esteem, inferior passions, or personal interests. All right, and that's the end of chapter 11, The Disciples, and we'll pick up on chapter 12, which is going to be a long one, so make sure to bring your popcorn and something to drink, and it's called True Initiation. All right, thank you for joining me at Soul Tribe, and if you'd like to be a guest reader, definitely contact David Berry either in Discord by sending him a message or send him an email. It'd be nice to hear your guys' voices or see you, whichever you prefer. All right, and until next time, you guys have a favorable day, and I'll talk to you later.